Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Levler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else.
So my guest this morning is Tom Moran, Executive Vice President of Suffolk AME. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Dan.
So, just for a little background for yourself, before joining the AME Executive Board, what unit were you in and what was your job responsibilities there?
I came from FRES, which is Fire, Rescue, and Emergency Services. We handle all the 911 calls for police, from the police department for ambulance and fire emergencies throughout the county.
Okay, so anytime someone calls 911 and it doesn't require a uniformed police officer, but does require something, on the ambulatory side and the on the fire side, obviously. So what got you motivated? You're in the unit, you're doing all the things you're doing, and then, what motivated you to come join the executive board and put yourself full-time in representation of AME members?
I think it stemmed from my being the unit president for FRES. I got myself involved. I was a person that had questions. It wasn't always I was very involved with the union, but then I got involved and, you sort of go to the pool and you jump in with both feet and got involved. After that point, I came up to the executive board. I served as a vice president. And now, since December, I've been the executive vice president.
Yeah, and a lot of people that get involved, they have that story that got them interested in activism, one way or the other. And I think, for yourself, just wanting to know what's happening, how are things happening, what's the process, can this be better, and just being involved. I know as a unit president, you were very engaged and part of the conversation, and on the executive board as well. We have long discussions about lots of different things. We got a lot of global topics that we have to take into account when representing such a large and diverse group. And I know it's been very valuable to me and the rest of the team to have your input and your perspective.
We have so many different units, jobs, titles. And I felt coming from a unit that does work 24 hours a day, the shop's always open, so to speak. You can't time when you're going to have an emergency and say, all right, there's got to be somebody there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I felt that I wanted to be involved and get the needs of the 24-hour units and the rotating units that don't work necessarily Monday through Friday.
Right, yeah, and that's a valuable perspective. So, what are some of your goals now being executive vice president? Some of the goals, things you hope to accomplish in your role?
Part of it is that I've seen the work and been involved in it. And now we've done a lot of great things, and we have a lot more great things that we can do moving forward, and that we're starting to lay that groundwork out, right? You build a house, your background, you're having an engineering background, you can't just decide what color shingles you want on the house. You have to build that foundation, build it up. You have that picture of that house in your mind, but you got to get there.
Yeah.
And you start off and you put in a good foundation and then you build it up. And I think that's what we're striving to do.
Yeah, you do find people sometimes when you have conversations and, they're hovering on, just using that analogy of building a house. But what about the second floor? And it's like, well, the second floor can't just float in the air. We've got to build this up. We've got to design this thing to grow and expand and to handle more. Not only were you active in FRES as an employee there, as a unit president, then coming up to the executive board and handling that role, but you've been involved in the fire service for a great number of years. Can you give us some of your background there, what your experiences have been, and what positions you've held, what all of that brings to the table?
So for most people that know me, I've been involved. It's my 29th year of being a volunteer firefighter. Got involved, it's sort of like the union. I got involved, I was a new guy, I started to learn, I wanted to learn more. I took classes to educate myself, not just book smart, but experience smart, right? You you got to have those experiences. Everybody wants in the fire service, you want to have a Rolodex in your head.
Yep.
And when I say a Rolodex is that you want to have faced different types of emergencies, and then when you're faced with them again, you know how to not only act, but you know what your mistakes might have been before, and you don't want to, continue to do those types of.
Yeah. So, and then, I mean, obviously you were a fireman. Did you hold any other title?
I was a firefighter. Once I had gotten some experience, the rank and structure is you become a lieutenant, you move up, you serve in that position for an elected time. Then you become the captain. And then after that, I was a deputy chief, and then finally chief of the Northern Irish Fire Department. And again, same thing as the union. You're responsible for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And you're responsible even when you're not there. So fire department to union, there's a lot of things that happen that you might not technically be involved in, but you're responsible for it.
Sure. And, I guess there's a lot that happens in the fire service world, because, these are elected positions, and your fire chief, you're elected in the community, right? So you have a responsibility to the public. You have to hold meetings. There has to be order and process. So a lot of what the union business side of things does was also very much something the fire service has.
Sure, you're responsible to every person, right from the brand new probie that comes in, the person that's the most senior person in the fire department that has their 40, 50 years. You're responsible to them. You're responsible to their families, that you're going to make sure that you take care of them, make sure that they come home after going to calls. You're going to make sure that you have that commitment to the community, that you have that relationships with the elected officials when you formulate your budget and tell them how much it actually does cost to do this. And you're doing that with a volunteer fleet. Kind of what happens a lot with our members in the union. We're asking them to help to do things, to advocate and be involved on a volunteer basis.
Right, yeah. They're using their own time and their own energies. And in the fire service, you're saying, hey, you don't have to be here at all, but please stand shoulder to shoulder with me as we run into a burning building. And in the union world, it's maybe not that same level of life and death, right? But there is such importance to what we do, especially when we get into some of the political stuff that we have to deal with. It becomes a little more difficult to get people to want to volunteer for that kind of stuff because it maybe involves making some phone calls or walking around and knocking on doors and saying hello to people and talking about a particular candidate, and it pushes people a little out of their comfort zone. But it is basically the same concept. It's something that you wouldn't maybe be inclined to do just for kicks. You understand it serves the greater good and that, the community needs it.
There's a lot of parallel lines between both of them, right? You are volunteering your time, but you see what the reward is, right? And a lot of the times in both cases, you're doing something, not necessarily knowing why you're doing it or how much what you're doing is affecting and making better the lives of other people.
Tom, you also you serve on a state board as well on the fire service side.
Correct. I am currently the seated treasurer for a New York State board. The New York State Parade and Drill Team Captains Association, overseeing members. It's broken down into 4 different areas, and we've had the discussion before between Nassau and Suffolk County, Western New York up near Buffalo, that area, and then also Northern New York.
Yeah, and that's something that's kind of popular with the community. People definitely tune in, and for those who don't know what that is, those are the drills that you'll see, the competitions between all the various fire departments there, again, volunteering to, show off their skills. How quick can I run up a ladder? How fast can we run this truck? It's a way of I guess, getting people who are volunteering their time and effort to, maybe, show off their skills in a competitive way. It makes it fun, but it pushes everybody to get better. So, there's more to it than this is just a fun event.
Sure.
It helps the community understand. It helps everybody to, push themselves.
I mean, it's a long-standing tradition that goes back to back in the days of, you had to be the fastest to be there in certain areas to put the fire out to get paid from the insurance company. And that's where it all stemmed from. And now it's gone through different inclinations. And and years to what it's become today.
Yeah. So, back on the union side of things, obviously this has been quite a crisis we've gone through with COVID. There's that fiscal element, there's the public health element, there's all of people's turmoil surrounding it, from people being very terrified all the way down and maybe not even believing it exists. There's that whole gamut of different ways of looking at it. But, COVID has been a big challenge for unions in general. But, in the public sector side, we are, for all intents and purposes, and this from being on the front line of the front line, when someone needs help and they're going to call their government, they're probably not calling an elected official. They're going to hit 911, and they may end up, speaking to you or, one of your coworkers to try and resolve an emergency. And government can't fail. So, health and safety of our workforce is absolutely paramount, because the community relies on us to do our jobs. It's very, there's a very varied gamut of jobs that, our members do for all of the people in Suffolk County. But, in your opinion, why is the health and safety of our members so important?
The health and safety of all our members, and especially with something that we're dealing with COVID, and how we're learning more, and each and every day things change, how you contract the disease, is that we need to make sure all our members are safe, that their families are safe. They have to come to their job, they have to go home, they have to live their lives. And we have essential services that we need people at every single day. The 24-hour units, the units that are out into the public, we need to make sure that all protections are there so that they can safely do their job and basically keep the county running.
Yeah, well, that's the great point. When you say keeping the county running, like your government has to be there for you in a crisis. And, as far as crises go, I think this definitely qualifies, if that's maybe even an understatement. So, how have we, with all of your involvement and everything else, how have we been protecting our members?
First and foremost, again, we're going to continue to make sure that all the safety is in place, that they're able to come to work, do their job, and let's say not have that in the back of their mind that I'm going to work and I'm going to get sick. So we've had to work with the administration. We've had to get creative. How do we keep all our people working? How do we keep them getting paid every 2 weeks? And we've had to be creative, and you've led the charge on it. We've had that good relationship to able to say, give the ideas to how we can safely do that, where it's applicable, and again, where it's not applicable, that we can get the job done every day, still while keeping everybody's safety as the paramount of the entire idea.
Sure. And, you and I have had, obviously, a number of conversations about making sure that the PPE was there for our members, making sure that the workplaces were set up the proper way so that we could have social distancing, and then there was, that big piece that we worked on with the county to say, if everybody's got to come in, or those folks that have to come in, we can't find ourselves a year or two from now battling out whether or not someone got sick at work or they got sick somewhere else. And if they have to be in, they're essential, they've got to be here, then there has to be some sort of presumption in place that they got sick at work. And we were able to secure that. That was a big deal. I know the state was working on something, for the state with that, and it still has yet to come to fruition, despite, any bills and discussions. They're all facing the same problems, and they all work with public workers as well. But in Suffolk County, we were able to secure that presumption that I think makes it, it's just that little peace of mind in the back of your head. Like, if something comes of this, I'm asked to come in and perform my function. Yes, I want to be there for my community, but what if something happens? What if there's long-term effects? Do I want to find myself a year or two from now having to go to court and fight out whether or not, I got sick at work? And why should I have to prove it? If I was working from home or wasn't working at all, that would be a very different story. But you have me physically coming in and doing all this work on behalf of the public, and I'm exposing myself. So, and then again, getting rapid testing out for the county workers, I think that was very important. Working on, now getting the vaccine rollout and making sure that as the federal government frees up the supply on the vaccines, that the systems are in place to ensure that frontline and essential workers are, not only in the line, but that the systems are there to actually get the vaccine and keep promoting that safety.
It all goes back to the work that we're doing all the time. Part of it is educating those that are deciding what happens, who gets tested, who gets the vaccine, of us publicly advocating for the job that they actually do. You might look at something black and white on a piece of paper that says a job description. I don't think anybody that works in the county that took a civil service exam looked at it and that's the job that they do every day. There's so much more entailed. And we've evolved right now, just going through this whole pandemic, just people in job titles doing other jobs that they never thought they would be doing.
Sure. And, to what extent, these some of the civil service titles are written in such a way they haven't really evolved with the times. Now, like data entry, a lot of data entry is being done on computers. It would be insane to say to somebody, I don't want to say insane, but, it would certainly be a stretch to say, listen, take all of this down in shorthand. First, prove to me that you're awesome at shorthand. Then take all this down in shorthand. Then type it up on a typewriter, and then, and then we'll send it out to a printer so we can mail it. Things don't work like that anymore. It goes right into the computer and it gets emailed out. It's definitely an interesting system, and they try and capture everything they can in a job title, and they say, okay, here's all the things we think this person may do. But the fact of the matter is, all of these jobs generally have related work as required as one of the caveats in there, and related work as required. That's really how they've adjusted to the times. Say, okay, well, you're not doing shorthand anymore, but typing on a computer is related work.
My earliest remembrance in my brain of what a union was is I think back to my grandfather. My grandfather worked for the Long Island Railroad. He started as a fireman. A fireman on the train would fire the coal. Now, that was what his union job description was. Move forward, when you don't have the coal-fired trains anymore, he was still a fireman and would basically just sit on the train because they still said it in the contract that you had to have one fireman on each train.
Right.
To the point where he finally said, I need to do something else because I don't think I could ever go through my career this way.
Right.
So he became an engineer.
Right.
And that's the thing that I remember about a union. I used to think to myself, well, you could have just sat on that train the rest of your career.
Right.
And he would instill in me like, that's not. I want to give an honest day's work for an honest day's pay.
Yeah, you want to contribute back to the society. Yeah, that's and again, unions advocate to make sure that folks have that transition. We've got this green energy thing. The governor's talking a lot about how are we going to get solar power? How are we going to get more wind power and whatever? And there's some very ambitious goals. I think they're achievable, but there's a whole existing industry that's used to doing things a different way. And how do we transition those folks away from an old system that's obsolete into this new system where they're dumping tons of money into education, working in partnership with unions to train people in these new jobs?
Sure, and always have enough spots for people that were doing a job that now if you're moving in another direction, we still have to protect all those people that are still doing those type of jobs, even if we do go outside of that job description a little bit and say now with this new added technology you want to put in, you're still going to need that support system.
No, that's true. And, again, just a little bit more on what unions do and why unions do it, and just using AME as an example, we have for our members, if someone in their family passes, they get some bereavement time in order to be able to, meet with their family and go through all of what you have to go through. And COVID happened. People couldn't get together and they couldn't, and so we sat down with management and we figured out a way to say, okay, well, we understand the way the world is now and this process still has to go on despite the fact that things, the world has changed some. Can we push back that date when COVID and its related, that impact of not being able to be around people, around family, and being able to grieve and work through that process. When that has passed, can we do the bereavement then? And we were able to figure out a way to get that stuff done. And that's maybe not something that you would see, and you would see that maybe in a private sector labor union, but in a private sector non-represented group where, you basically, you're on your own. You take a job somewhere, there's no one there advocating for you except for yourself. You can end up, you probably wouldn't even get bereavement in the first place. Never mind saying, can I take it later on?
I could speak firsthand. During this, my wife's uncle passed away, and he lived in upstate, so we're not even talking about travel restrictions, but it was how do the family from all over get to the services? And so they weren't right away. They had to be down the line a little bit, and then I was able to, be there for my wife while she was grieving, and that probably wouldn't have happened if we didn't have those safeguards in place.
Sure, yeah.
Or have the ability just to have that conversation and use that idea to say, hey, this is something that we might need to do, and this is the plan how you can do it. You're already giving people bereavement time, but sometimes it's just not, it doesn't fall into the calendar. You never know when somebody, unfortunately, is going to pass. You also don't know what's going on in the world at that time or where you'd even be in your point in that life.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And, again, that's the whole point of everything that we do is to try and be that voice for the members, sort through the issues, find out what's really important, and try and get those things done. As much as possible, work in partnership with people. But every once in a while, people definitely are aware of this about unions, but sometimes, someone's not going to see the light of day unless, they realize that, this is actually a really important issue to someone. And so, there are times where we got to get combative and stand our ground and get, maybe a little aggressive. And I think back to, Suffolk Community College and them not wanting to negotiate in good faith and some of the pressures we had to put on there. But, they worked. It made the point. Everybody was standing together and saying, no, we need a contract. This is fair. This needs to be equitable, and this needs to happen. And it can't wait until whenever you feel like it. This needs to happen now. And so we all worked in partnership with the folks at the college or members at the college, the executive board, and we put resources behind it to make sure that the public was aware of what was going on. And we see members of the public calling the college and saying, hey, what's going on? These guys are working, and this is pre-pandemic by a matter of months, but still, it's just another example of what labor unions do on behalf of the people that they represent. And when we're successful, you see those types of protections become commonplace in other industries that don't have representations. Weekends didn't used to exist before there were unions. There's so many things that everybody just takes for granted. Like, it doesn't matter where you get a job, you're going to get X, Y, and Z. It's the law now, but it became the law because unions fought for that, and it didn't used to be the case. Imagine having to work 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's, well, I can't say I don't know what that feels like. But anyway, our members are out there on the front line. They are essential. They are providing services to the community. We've got, epidemiologists, public health nurses. We've got the custodial workers that are keeping everybody safe in all their functions throughout government, cleaning up hot spots and making sure daily that everything is handled so that the public's safe coming in, so that the workforce is safe coming in. We've got caseworkers working on our most vulnerable populations. These problems don't go away when there's a crisis. And in a lot of instances, they're exacerbated. They become greater, and there are more cases to deal with. And again, back to your old job, dispatchers, these are all very important jobs that can't fail. And we've already talked why it was important to keep them protected while they're at work so these functions of government can continue. But why, how do you see, the vaccine in this process? We've come into Category 1B now, and some of our members are covered. But, from my way of thinking, frontline and essential workers who are out there, doing this type of work, they need to be included. And everybody wants to be included. Everybody everywhere wants to be included. So, why do you see it as being important to have, these folks?
The most important thing is the work that we've already started that continues. That's a daily, almost update of looking at all our job titles, making sure that the powers that be on the local level and the state level, and quite frankly on the federal level, know exactly just what our workers do, what they are exposed to. I mean, they keep the county running every single day in so many different facets. You don't see all of them, especially from the world I come from. People that work at Fres, the people that work at police emergency. Those are the people that are answering the phone. That's their contact with the public, right? They're not physically face to face, but they need to be at that phone position. They need to be at that radio position so that they can help the people that are infected with this, that are having the normal everyday emergency that happens.
Right.
And then we have the rest of our workforce, those that generate revenue, that keep this county afloat, that need to be at their spot, that need to deal with the public, that need to deal with their coworkers. So they're all, they might not fall into the category as somebody that's making a decision of who should get something and who should not. We're going to continue to make sure that everybody gets the vaccination. And again, we're gonna come to that point where there's going to be people that, maybe don't want it. Maybe they have their feelings, and nothing anybody says is going to change that,
Right.
their feelings on it. But to combat this and to get this thing under control, we got to have our testing. We got to have people vaccinated. We have to have, people's health is the number one priority.
Sure. And, with that in mind, getting that vaccine out there, it's that opportunity that we're looking for. If they say, listen, regardless of how you feel, you can't have access to the vaccine, well, that's one thing. Versus saying you have access to the vaccine and it is now your decision whether or not you want to take it, right? So that's, that's the distinction there. And Tom, what do you see as the priorities, during and beyond this pandemic for AME?
The priorities are always one is the protection, right? We have to protect all our members. We have to make sure that we are continuing to grow their benefits, their job security. Those are all things that we continue to do and continue to work forward through the process. Again, we're trying to stay ahead of what changes are going to be happening, right?
Sure.
What's going to change after this fact? What's going to be the economic effect on our workforce? Not just as being our employees, but being people that live in the community. So these are all things that we're working on, that we're planning for now. We're making that foundation now because we know we have to get to a point down the road.
No, you're absolutely right. This is part of building that foundation. And, I guess another aspect of that I just want to talk to you about is, legislation, things that happen either in the county, on the state level, and sometimes even the federal level. It can have big impacts on everyone. And we see this year, at least on the state level, a couple of days into this year and into them being, quote unquote, in session, and they've got over 3,000 bills on the table right now, which is massive, close to 10 times what was on the table the year before. And in all of those bills, there could be language that is either helpful or harmful to everyday people, to workers in general, and to our workforce, and can impact anything from, you hear some of the talk about, they want to get mobile sports betting as a revenue generator for the state to help close that $15 billion deficit that the state is facing. They're looking at legalizing marijuana for recreational use. And, it's more than just saying, okay, we're allowing these two things to happen and therefore they'll generate revenue. When you look at, even just the marijuana issue, well, who can and who can't, right? You say we legalize it for everyone. But there are people, there aren't any tests that check right now that we're aware of and available in the state to check for impairment like they can with alcohol. Are you drunk right now while you're driving your vehicle? Therefore, we can take some sort of action to prevent you from harming yourself and others. All they can do is test for exposure, which means in the last 30 days, you may have been around somebody. Or maybe on the weekend when you weren't at work, you ate a gummy bear, but now we can't tell if you did it now or if you did it on the weekend. But you deal with, certain types of, again, for our members, you deal with certain types of government work where you could be deposed or cross-examined because you're dealing with some, maybe vulnerable population. There's some question as to whether or not you did your job the right way. Are we going to tell some people they can't use this product while other people can? And what do we do about that when we're saying it's legal for everyone except for you? Well, how do we deal with that? On top of that, taxation, right? So, if we're going to legalize this product, what does that do to the black market? And what does that do to the market that, is technically legalized, but maybe the revenue is all going to the state and the municipality who has the mandate from the state of protecting the health and safety of all of its residents and people who are visiting and just working here, whatever. Everyone's got to be safe in the municipality they're in. That's a mandate from the state. Here's extra work to do, but here's no additional revenue to meet those goals. That's just, two simple issues that we could look at. Now we've got another 3,000 plus that all have to be combed through. And what happens there and whether or not we weigh our voice in, we could ignore all of this stuff and say, whatever happens, happens, and we'll deal with it. But that's not being proactive. And that's not how we deal with things. We want to know in advance, and we want to get our voice in advance, and we want to make sure that when someone gets elected to office, that they understand the labor community, and that they understand those needs, and that they're willing to listen to us. It's not a question of whether or not, we can walk into a particular person's office and say, we don't want this to happen. And they say, okay, well, because you said so. But at least they sit down, they hear about the issue, they understand that it's more than just the voices they've already heard. There's also labor has a perspective as well. Working people have a perspective.
And that's the big component of it all, right? Is that we're able to be in those conversations. We're able to show not only why it's good, but how it's going to impact other things that happen, how it impacts our workforce, how it impacts just the county in general. And that's huge for us. And that's why, there's a lot of stuff that happens that you wouldn't normally think a union does. But these are things that are going on every single day. Again, federal, state, local. And to have those relationships, to be able to bring ideas that end up turning into part of the law is something that you can't just change. You can't ever, lose that. You can't lose that type of relationship that's been established, because the only way you're going to grow is to continuing watering that flower, so to speak.
Yeah, no, you're right. So my guest this morning, Tom Moran, Executive Vice President, Suffolk AME. And Tom, I want to thank you, for your time this morning, all of your valuable input in your time being at AME, either as a unit representative and now on the executive board. And I know we're all proud to have you standing with us as we continue to build that foundation and grow what it is we do on behalf of the members we represent and all working people.
It really is. I'll only say it because labor is in the title, but it is a labor of love. Because, to work the way that you have to do to think this way and get your ideas out there and get the union continuing moving down the track, so to speak. I'll throw that in for my grandfather.
There you go, down the track.
Yep.
So, all right. So, Tom, again, thank you for joining us. And to our listeners, we'll speak to you next week.